I'm Jess.
And I'm Taryn.
And this is the Extra Lucky Podcast. Inspiring change,
Shifting narratives,
cultivating joy.
Wow, what an honor to be here sort of as the first dad taking over an episode of the Extra Lucky Podcast. My name is Danny Jordan. You may have heard me on a previous episode of the Extra Lucky Podcast. I was a guest. I got to hang out with Taryn and Jess in New York. We had a great conversation and explored my journey of being the parent of a child with a disability. So if you want to learn more about me, you can go back and listen to that episode. But what an honor to be here today, chatting with someone who's becoming a fast friend. I have to say, we just met, I don't know, about a month and a half ago. I want to say it was right after I'd met Jess and Taryn in New York, and they're like, "You got to meet this guy." You were like both like rock star dads and similar story. And I've come to realize that we have a lot more in common, even more than just being dads and dads of kids with disabilities. And we're going to explore so much of that today. So please join me in welcoming to the Extra Lucky Podcast, our special Father's Day episode with my fast friend, Brady Murray. How are you, Brady?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, Danny.
I'm excited to be here. This is cool. I feel like, we're filling some big shoes, here today. Taryn and Jess have been holding down, and now they're like, "Hey, just go do this thing and have fun and don't mess it up."
I agree. It's a big responsibility. We gotta do our best.
We're gonna do great, and so big shout out to the Extra Lucky community. I know so many of you all around the world are listening into this show. So thanks for letting us step in and be a part of this. So Brady, I do want to start off, I sort of alluded to this when I was introing you that, we got introduced through Taryn and Jess, and we sort of become these fast friends. And one thing that I found that you and I have in common is a love for baseball.
Yes, we do.
Which is cool. Like let's sort of like go back in your story a little bit. Like when did baseball come into your life, and why has baseball meant so much to you?
Yeah, so baseball came into my life. I actually remember specifically the day. I was 5 years old. We lived in a trailer court in Kemmer, Wyoming. Might want to Google that because it's way out in the middle of nowhere. And we were on the edges of town of Kemmer, Wyoming. My friends, I had a few older friends that came over and asked me, "Brady, do you want to go play baseball?" And I'm like, "Sure, I don't know how to play." And we went to an empty lot where they had just pulled a trailer out. So there's a space there. And they gave me these black cleats, and they gave me a bat, and they showed me how to hold the bat. And they said, "You're going to be Del Murphy." And I said, "Who's Del Murphy?" And they said, "He's the greatest baseball player of all time." This was 1983. Del Murphy, I think, was the MVP that year as well in the National League. And so I just remember I thought, I like baseball and I love Del Murphy. And so that's kind of where the precipitous of it all started.
Wow. It feels like you're describing the plot of the movie Sandlot.
To a certain degree, there's a lot of truth to that.
You were Scotty Smalls is really is what we have discovered here today. They're like,
That's
here's
right.
this, well, how do I catch it? Just put your glove up in the air.
That's right.
I'll do the rest sort of situation. So baseball became a part of your life at a very young age. And what would you say are some of like the greatest lessons that you learned from playing ball?
Well, baseball is a game that everybody can find an interest in the sense of like the life lessons that you can learn from it. So I loved playing it. I love coaching it right now with my kids, but I'm also just a fan of the game because it's a place where you can just let your worries go aside, and for a couple hours you can just truly go and honestly be a kid again. So this is a special sport, and there's a lot of symbolism that I think we'll talk about today just in regards to the disability community and how baseball is truly empowering people to sing the song they're meant to sing in that community.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it felt like a good place to start. I think when you think of Father's Day, like so often you think of like, oh, going to a ball game with your dad. Like I recently got a text from my father-in-law, and almost every year the Dodgers, because I'm a big Dodger fan here in Los Angeles, they always seem to play on Father's Day, and they do like a cool Father's Day thing where after the game you get to go down on the field and like play catch, with your dad or your grandpa or whatever. And don't worry, people who are concerned thinking about thousands of people throwing baseballs around. They give you foam baseballs, so they don't let you like lace an 80-mile-an-hour hard ball around the field because that would get messy very quickly. But my father-in-law texted me. He's like, "What do you think about Father's Day at Dodger Stadium again this year?" And so in honor of Father's Day, I sort of just wanted to start out with that conversation. And I agree. I mean, I feel like baseball taught me so much about, because I played for 14 years, and it taught me so much about teamwork, about sort of like stepping out, and performing on your own and sort of finding your light, singing your song, as you were saying, but also the importance of working as a team and supporting one another. So I feel like it laid a lot of the foundation for who I've become as a dad, who I've become as a leader in business, and just sort of a human being. So a lot of lessons to learn in sports for sure. So speaking of being a dad, like growing, I'm always interested to find this out. Like for me, I come from a big family, and I have a ton of cousins and aunts and uncles, and I always wanted to be a dad. What about you? Was that something you always felt called to?
Yeah, fatherhood is a very tender subject for me. I am one that I can say I am one of the few people in the world that can say I truly have two amazing fathers.
Mm.
And let me explain. I was born Brady Gomez, and my parents quickly or shortly thereafter were divorced.
Mm.
When I was 4, my mom met and married a man by the name of Brady Murray, who later adopted me when I was 13. And I have still maintained a wonderful relationship with my birth father, Danny, and I have a wonderful relationship, obviously, with my adoptive father, Reed. And so, fatherhood is something that I cherish, and I am the man who I am today as a result of my fathers, Danny and Reed. So it is a
Wow.
tender subject for sure.
And I would assume, because I feel like you're a pretty open book, what I've gathered from you in the last couple of months that we've gotten to know each other, have you had those intimate conversations with both of your dads about how much
Yeah,
they individually meant to you?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that is just such a tender mercy and a tender subject for me. And they're very different. Like these two are very, very distinct, very, very different skill sets, attributes, professions, everything. Very, very different, almost polar opposites, if you may. And I just contribute the man who I am today, where I just take those beautiful attributes that each of my fathers have entrusted me and just trying to be a good steward of those now.
Yeah. Well, this is another thing that we have in common, Brady, because my folks divorced when I was pretty young. I have no memories of them ever being together. I think they officially got divorced when I was like 3.5 or 4 years old. And, fortunately, I'm blessed enough to have an incredible stepdad who I consider to be my dad,
Yeah,
and him and my mom married right before I turned 5 years old. And he's just been this rock in my life, from childhood all the way up until now. And just like you, like my birth father and my stepdad could not be more different
yeah,
from each other. Like, my dad, my birth father's like the dreamer, like go out into the world and like have these big dreams and chase them to the ends of the earth, almost, to a fault sometimes. And
yeah,
then, my stepdad is like, go to college, get your degree, get your job, put in your,
yeah,
30 plus years with this company and like save for tomorrow. Like it's just very, very
yeah.
different. But what a beautiful gift that we get. It sounds like you got, that sometimes, unfortunately there are people, a lot of men out there don't have the best dad experience,
Sure.
and they don't necessarily have that other sort of male father figure in their life. But I feel like you and I have been blessed enough to have a balance of like, hey, dream big, believe in yourself, but also be level headed and be smart
Right.
about the decisions that you make. And I feel like that sets people up to be great dads,
That's
and
right.
from what I can tell, man, you are an amazing father. And you first became a dad back in, was it 2007 that you first became a dad, or that's
Yeah,
when?
2005,
Oh,
my
five.
daughter
Okay.
Brindley was born, and shortly thereafter, in 2007, is when I welcomed my first son, Nash, into my life.
Right. And as you say, that's when your life changed forever. Can you take us back to July of 2007 and what that experience was for you?
Yeah, of course. And so we were so thankful for Brindley, our daughter. She is like an amazing first child, and she's a senior in high school, just about ready to graduate. So it's
Oh,
a
wow.
tender time in life for us right now. But shortly thereafter, Andrea and I knew and found out that we were expecting a little boy. And so we talk about baseball, and I grew up playing a lot of baseball. And so I naturally had these visions of being able to play catch with my son, to coach his teams, to ultimately see him play baseball. I envisioned state championship baseball games, and I envisioned hiking and fishing and all the amazing things that you're going to do with your son as a dad. And Andrea did amazing during the labor and the delivery. Was so proud of her, and before I knew it, there was my boy, and he was perfect. I was taking pictures. I was making little videos. I was doing everything that you do as a brand new dad. I counted 10 fingers, 10 toes. He's perfect. Everything looks great. And about 10 minutes after Nash was born, the doctor came up to me and he put his arm around me and he walked me kind of to the back of the delivery room. And in a very quiet voice, he said, "Brady, we think that your son has Down syndrome."
Mm.
And that was the first that I had heard of that. I
Oh, really?
never, that was not on the radar. There was no pre-diagnosis before Nash was delivered. I was reeling. I immediately became very emotional and was just struggling, having a really hard time. I got very fearful and just trying to process all these emotions. And then I got really scared because I knew that I now had the responsibility to go tell my wife, who had just gone through delivery,
Yeah.
what the doctor had told me. And so I pondered that and I really tried to muster up the courage. I said a silent prayer in my heart just for strength to be able to do this. And I walked over to her bed and I knelt down next to her bed and I was visibly emotional. And she grabbed my hand and she said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And in the best way that I could, just through my emotions, I said, "Andrea, the doctor told me that Nash has Down syndrome." And I watched and I looked into her eyes and I immediately saw her when I told her that story, or I told her what the doctor had just told me. She immediately looked down and then almost as quick looked back up and looked me right in the eye and smiled and said, "Great. Can I hold my son?"
Oh, man.
And I knew in that moment that everything was going to be okay. I am very transparent in the sense that it's not like in that moment everything was fixed, but I was extreme. I was emotional for a long time, and still to this
Mm.
day, it's very raw. But
Right.
Andrea has been my rock, and it's been difficult for her as well. But it truly has been a tremendous, tremendous blessing for most of those listeners, I'm guessing, that are part of this extra lucky club. Know firsthand what a blessing that a child with Down syndrome is.
Right. So, what were you feeling in that moment when, because you're fearful, like you said, you're trying to figure out how do I, communicate this to my wife, and then you share this news that maybe some part of you is worried that it's gonna impact her in the same way that it's impacting you, and
Yeah,
maybe your mind's sort of spinning out about like, how's it going to impact our family and our marriage and all these sorts of
of course.
things, in this story that you've written for Nash's life and how things are going to go in the baseball and everything. When your wife reacted in that way, how did that impact you?
Yeah. One, I've always known that I married up and that my wife is an individual that has wonderful intuition. She's the most selfless person that I know in my whole life. One of the things that just drew me to Andrea as we were dating was actually how I saw her interact with children,
Mm.
in particular the underdogs, if you may. And so, I come from extended family that's very large, and there's always like kids, always babies, and we'd go to a family function, and whatever child was crying or whatever child wasn't feeling well or whatever child needed a hug, Andrea just gravitated towards those children,
Mm.
and that was something that really drew me to her. And so when I got to see Andrea react to this diagnosis of Down syndrome and then really just be very courageous in how to process that and how to move forward, just made that love and that appreciation for my beautiful wife go up even more. And so
Oh my gosh.
definitely if Andrea was on the show with us today, she'd be the first to say, like, look, like I unconditionally accepted Nash, but that didn't mean that this was easy. And she had
Right.
her own moments that she had to process the emotions that I was able to support her in. But by and large, we believe wholeheartedly that life entrusts us with experiences, some we choose, and some that life chooses for us. And this was one that life chose for us, and we embrace it wholeheartedly and just want to be great stewards of this journey that we have now.
That's amazing. Now, you talked about like, processing all the emotions, and like you said, Andrea, she's like, okay, let me hold my son. Like she's ready to jump in and be that mother. But like as time goes by, like we encounter sort of new challenges. And though, for us, like we found out about Emerson and her disability when my wife was about 21 weeks pregnant. So we sort of had some time
Yeah.
to wrap our minds around it, but that didn't necessarily make it any easier. And as life goes on, and this is sort of where I want to go with this next question is like, do you find that as Nash gets older and that as you guys get older and your family continues to grow, that there's always new things to sort of be figuring out along the journey?
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing it right now. And, there's at first when Nash was a baby, he's just a baby like the other babies, and it didn't seem like we needed to take this head on just yet. And there was a little bit of a time period. But then there's milestones that other babies that were Nash's age were hitting that Nash wasn't even close to, and you kind of have to start to process those. And there's milestones that you mourn as well,
Mm,
and there's constant things that you experience that way. So right now, Nash is going to be 17 in a year from now, or not even a year, a month, 2 months from now, and in about a year from now, he's going to be an adult, the sense of 18, and those are all questions that I have in my mind. And my boy, he's just like any other 16-year-old. He's got hormones and he loves girls, and he's just processing all those emotions. And Nash tells me, he says, Dad, I want to get married.
mm,
And I want to support Nash in being able to achieve that goal, but I'm not exactly sure how that works, right? And
right.
so there's still a lot of emotion that I have, and things that I am processing right now to ultimately allow my son to sing that song that he's meant to sing, because we all have a divine purpose, and especially those that the world would describe as being disabled. They too especially have a divine purpose.
Right. Did you find, I want to go back a little bit because this is sort of, triggering something in my mind is, you talked about like when Nash was a baby, and I feel like the world at large who's not connected to the disability community, when they meet a baby who maybe has a disability, they don't notice it as much. And then as your child starts to get older and they don't necessarily have that baby look to them anymore, maybe this is just a me thing, but I noticed like as Emerson has gotten older, I have started to realize how the world interacts with her differently, and how the world looks at her differently. And that was a huge adjustment period for me because, Emmy, when she was young, most of that time was spent in the pandemic.
Yep.
So it wasn't until she was like, I don't know, around three, I want to say 2.5, 3 years old, that we went to like Disneyland for the first time. And that was like our first time around a large group of people. And it's like my radar was so up for like every person I noticed, like taking a second look at Emerson, or maybe sort of a child whispering something to their parent. Did you have a similar experience as Nash started to get older and sort of watching how the world reacts?
Interestingly enough, I had an experience 3 weeks after Nash was born that was what I would refer to as a baptism by fire into this.
Okay.
And so Nash was born in July of 2007, and I graduated from high school in 1997. And so 3 weeks after Nash was born, we had our 10-year class reunion scheduled.
Okay.
So if you think back to 10-year class reunion, you're young enough, and like looks still matter to you. And you're you're out of college now, so you're gainfully employed, and so there's maybe some sense of like, how is everybody doing, and how do I compare against everybody else and how they're doing. And that 10-year class reunion's kind of primed up for that.
Right.
And I remember, again, going back to just thinking of pre Nash being born, and my thoughts and ideas of Nash and all the great things that we were going to be able to accomplish together. And he was definitely something that I was so proud of, to be a dad, that I have this beautiful boy and this beautiful girl, and something that I would share at my class reunion. And so leading up to that class reunion, knowing that I'd be attending that and being able to tell people that I have a boy who has Down syndrome, caused me to reflect inwardly really where my heart was.
Mm.
and it allowed me to be able to see what was really important.
Hmm.
And I remember when I got to that class reunion, one of the first people that I saw was Patrick, my classmate that I had forgot all about, that has Down syndrome.
Hmm.
And he was there with his dad.
Hmm.
And I thought, how lucky am I that I get to go to my son's class reunion when he's 10 and his 10-year class reunion and take him there in how many years that's going to be down the road, 30 years down the road.
Right.
And there was just an evolution that transpired, like a very rapid evolution that I was forced to be able to see life differently and
Yeah.
even see myself differently, and ultimately really have been entrusted with a new heart, different
Hmm.
perspective, different ways to be able to see things. And what's unique about that is it's not like I was changed in a moment. I
Right.
still experience that to this day, that I'll take Nash out to the store and clearly he has Down syndrome, and be able to see those different looks that people have, and to be able to have seen how the evolution within my heart has evolved so
Hmm.
much over the last decade and a half, from the time when at first I was maybe a little sheepish to the time now where it's like, you know what, like this is my boy, and this is what it is. But I definitely also have those experiences where I get a little bit like Papa Bear, and so I'll be a little protective, a
Yeah.
little overprotective maybe. But yeah, those are real emotions that I still experienced even to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I'm sure a lot of parents who listen to this podcast, and becoming a parent in general unlocks this part of your heart and your spirit that you didn't know and you couldn't be prepared for because you never felt all these feelings before. And then you add on this additional layer of becoming a parent of a child with a disability. And
Yep,
in the case of, Down syndrome, and in the case of, limb difference, with Emerson, my daughter, like, it's a visible disability. So
that's
like
right.
you are immediately sort of like thrust into being so hyper aware
That's
of
right.
the way the world sort of acts. Right. And so now, like, your emotions are heightened because you're a parent for the first time, but your emotions are even more heightened because you're the parent of a child with a disability,
That's
and all
right.
you want is this world to be more accepting and to be more inclusive, and to not, belittle your child or anyone who is like them, or think less of them because of the way you look. And it's interesting you bring up that, like, Papa Bear uh, thing, because, with my books I do these school assemblies, and what's great is, like, we provide this safe space for all these kids to ask questions, right? And to be curious, because I think that's important. I think that removes this stigma that sort of exists in society around disability or differences, that it's weird, or something, that's wrong with the world, where it's just we're
Sure.
all different, and I had a kid ask me at an assembly recently. He walked up to me after the assembly ended. He didn't actually ask me, he just made a statement. He goes, "You know how I know that your story's not true?" And I was like, "Well, how's that?" And he goes, "Nobody in the world has two fingers." And I said, "Well, actually, I'm here to inform you that there are people, and my daughter is one of them." He goes, "Nope." And I said, "Well, buddy, I'm so sorry that you feel that way, but here's the facts." And he, like, turned around, he looked at me, and he just, like, blew a raspberry with his tongue and just, like,
Wow.
walked off. And you talk about, like, the Papa
Yeah.
Bear, and part of me is like, I got to go walk with this kid and have a conversation with him and
Right.
help him understand the way the world is. But
Right.
also, I'm like, you know what? This kid probably has his own things going on
Yep.
at home. I just met this child 10 minutes ago. Like, you sort of have to constantly be uh, regulating your emotions and choosing, the moments that you sort of react. And that's hard, man. Like, it's
Super hard.
and nothing can prepare you for it.
No
Yeah.
question. That's extremely hard. And hats off to you for handling that situation as good as you did, because that's a definitely stirs some Papa Bear emotions.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the thing is, like, it's interesting because in my book, like, I sort of write about this, in the capables, and I address sort of like this first day and a dad sort of navigating these emotions. And, like, when this was happening, I was like, man, I need to take some notes from the dad in the capables, because, like, he is so much more level headed in these
No
moments.
doubt.
And it's
No doubt.
funny how you can sort of be talking to yourself in the future when you sort of write these sorts of things. But What I think is so incredible about you, Brady, is that you encountered this experience, which, as you said, in the moment, was shocking, and there was a lot of fear, and then you fast forward 9 years later, and your journey as a family, you have more children, and you decide that you feel called to explore adoption, and specifically adoption of your son Cooper. Tell me about how that all came to be with adopting Cooper.
Man, I tell you, it was not logical to go from the, what do they call it, the frying pan into the fire, as it relates to having a son who has Down syndrome and then considering adopting a child that has Down syndrome as well. Andrea and I had been serving in the adoption space. As I shared, adoption is near and dear to my heart. We had created a nonprofit that helped inspire families to consider adopting a
Mm.
child with Down syndrome. But honestly, that was for other people to adopt a child with Down syndrome. That was not for us to adopt a child with Down syndrome. And so we were 4 or so years into advocating for these kids. We'd had a few dozen children get adopted through the organization. And Andrea came to me one morning and she said, "Honey, what do you think about adopting a child?" And I said, "I would love to,
Mm.
because, adoption is near and dear to my heart." And she said, "What do you think about adopting a child with Down syndrome?" And I said, "Not a chance." She said, "Honey, I want to invite you to just ponder that and think about that and
Mm.
see if you can open your heart to at least considering what that might look like." And so I just love and respect my wife and 100% want to honor her feelings and her wishes. And so I did just that. And over the next few weeks and early morning hours before anybody got up, I spent time pondering and really thinking about what would that mean to our family.
Mm.
And honestly, I could think of 100 different ways, if not more, as to why that made no sense whatsoever. But I could not deny in my heart that there was the smallest little seed that was there that I knew that was telling me that this is something
Mm.
that I should consider. And so I did the best that I could to put all of those fears, anxieties, and reasons why this made absolutely no sense away. And I just held on to that little seed and I nourished that seed. And I watched that seed start to grow to a point where I knew with all my heart that this was something that we were supposed to do. And
Wow.
so we began the process of exploring where and what and who and how all that works. And we were led to a little boy that was found placed on a street corner in a city of 14 million people in Tianjin, China, when he was guesstimated to be 6 months old, that
Wow.
needed a forever family. He was in an orphanage. He was 4. In fact, he was 3 at the time. And we saw a picture of him. And when we saw a picture of this beautiful little Chinese boy that has Down syndrome, we knew that that was our son. And so we
Mm.
started the process. It took about a year to complete. We traveled to China where we were united with our son, who we named Cooper. So
Mm.
Coop's home now. Coop's 12. And Coop is the life of the party in the Murray household. That's for sure.
Amazing. How would you say, obviously you went through this first experience with Nash. How has it been different with Cooper, and how has Cooper impacted you as a man and as a dad?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Coop, um, Coop, Coop's, I wouldn't go as far as saying nonverbal. He talks. Boy, does he talk. But you're probably only understanding about every seventh word that he's saying. And he's super
Okay.
expressive and he talks with his hands and he's just got these bright eyes and a really bright smile and is just the king of hugs in the sense of like loves to just love. And he's just a very loving and caring child. And so I've seen it happen with Nash and I'm seeing it happen with Cooper now over the last number of years as he's been in our life, is that those two are the glue of our
Mm.
family. Those two are the ones that are able to sense when somebody needs a hug. Those are the two that when the other kids are having issues are the ones that are going to break that up, not by saying, "Hey, you go over here and you go over here," but them just being there and them being
Mm.
themselves and them giving those amazing unconditional hugs to everybody are the glue of our family. And Coop has
Wow.
just taken something that was so beautiful in Nash and made that times 10 now. And so we just really have two superheroes in our family that are the uniting factor that are the glue.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Now, speaking of superheroes and speaking of the nonprofit, let's chat a little bit about Rod's Heroes, which is your nonprofit that you and your wife, form. What is Rod's Heroes and what's your guys' mission?
Yeah, so Rod's Heroes is an organization that we inspire families to answer the call to adopt a child with Down syndrome or other unique circumstances. And so this inspiration for this organization came back in 2011 when Andrea and I learned about what happens to children that have disabilities when they are born in many developing countries. And what happens is they are given up, they are abandoned. And so, like the example of Coop was essentially abandoned when he was 6 months old. And so that happens throughout the world. And we saw these pictures of kids that were, the age of Nash, who was 4 at the time, that are just skin and bones, that are crib ridden, that haven't
Mm.
learned to walk, that are 4 years old, that weigh 22 pounds. And that light that we've grown to love and see in this disability community is just gone, and it's dim. And we'd see these pictures and we thought we have to do something to be able to help these children. And so that was where the inspiration for Rod's Heroes came about, is we started a nonprofit to be able to help inspire these families to be able to adopt these kids. And fast forward now, we've been running at a full pace for over a decade. We have over 100 children that have been adopted. In fact, when you take into account all aspects, it's in the hundreds. And we're
Wow.
at 93 that have been adopted that have Down syndrome. So it's been a really special experience for us.
And do you stay in contact with those families? Like, do they reach out and sort
As
of
best
share
we
their
can.
stories with
And
you?
that
Yeah.
is like the most fun part of it, is to be able to see a little guy that got adopted when he was 5 that's now 15 years old, and truly seeing those individuals sing the song they're meant to sing. Because our role is just be able to get them out of the orphanage and be able to give them a shot to be able to sing that song they're meant to sing. Like, we truly believe that when a child is adopted, it's like giving a superhero a cape. Like, they have their
Mm.
superpowers now, or their opportunity at least to be able to utilize those superpowers. So
Wow.
that's Rod's Heroes.
And do you feel like that connects back to the kid in Brady? When you talk about you being adopted as a kid and how that impacted you as a child, and obviously has impacted you as an adult. Like, do you feel like this is sort of like the full circle for you of how your life started and now what you're doing as a dad?
No doubt. No doubt. Reed Murray, who doesn't look anything like me, we were very different, uh, got to know me when I was 4 years old, and when he started to date my mom.
Hmm.
And my mom still to this day will say, I believe your dad wanted to marry me because he wanted to raise you.
Wow.
And Reed didn't have to. That wasn't that wasn't something that was asked of him per se, but he gave me a shot. He believed in me, and he raised me as his own son. And as a result of that, there's no doubt, I think that that's a large part of the motivation for me and Rod's Heroes, and large part of the motivation for Andrea and I to adopt the children that we have now, and a large part on why I want to get every kid in every orphanage throughout the world a family.
Yeah. I'm thinking in this moment, you shared that when Andrea said she wanted to adopt a child with Down syndrome, and you're like, I have 100 plus reasons why this doesn't make sense, but there was some little seed inside of you.
Yep.
It felt like it was like Brady as a kid who was like, remember what this meant to you and how this
No
has
doubt.
impacted your life. Now you have the opportunity to do the same thing.
That's right.
It feels like you were just perfectly equipped to do what you were doing. And, it's one thing to be perfectly equipped, but to answer that call is incredible. And I think what you guys are doing as parents with Rod's Heroes is just amazing. And all the kids that you've given hope, and the parents whose lives you've changed through bringing these children into their homes, and the light that has come into their home, into their life. It's a blessing for sure. Now, speaking of Coop and baseball, this is why I sort of started with baseball. And people were like, why did this guy start with baseball 30 minutes ago? What is wrong with him? You're going to get it now, because you have this amazing campaign that you guys have been doing with Cooper, which is Cooper's First Pitch campaign. What is Cooper's First Pitch? Tell us about the journey and what your guys' mission is with this.
Yeah, so something that I've learned over the years is that when we allow ourselves to get caught up in a cause bigger than ourselves, we will witness miracles. And that is a universal principle that applies to anybody. We have witnessed a miracle. And so with Rod's Heroes, about 2 years, well, a year and a half ago, we had a professional baseball player and his wife reach out to us on Instagram and invite us to come down to spring training. And that is where Cooper actually had the opportunity to throw out the first pitch at a Chicago Cubs game at spring training.
Wow.
So it's Justin and Libby Steele. Justin is the ace for the Chicago Cubs and have just become near and dear friends. We thought, what an amazing special opportunity for Coop, spring training, a major league game. That's amazing. Well, Coop went out and he took full advantage of that opportunity. So he went out, first and foremost, he captured every single person's attention in that whole area. He had his little cape on and his baseball uniform, and he's just doing exactly what he does when he gets on stage. Like he is made for the big stage. And then he got super serious, and he looked into this catcher, and he threw a perfect strike, and then just celebrated like he had won the World Series. Well, the Cubs had seen that, and they said, hey, we like this kid. Would he come out to Wrigley and throw out the first pitch in Chicago?
Whoa.
And I'm like, of course he would. And so we went out to Wrigley on Memorial Day of last year, and Coop threw out the first pitch in front of a sold-out crowd and just crushed it. Did the exact same thing. I mean, just caught everybody's attention in that entire stadium,
Wow.
and then celebrated like he won the World Series. Well, Lightning, we kind of, in a certain degree, captured lightning in a bottle when 2 weeks later the Boston Red Sox reached out to us and said, hey, would this kid come out to Fenway and throw out the first pitch at Fenway? And I'm like, is this really happening? So sure enough, we're back in Boston. Coop does an amazing job, and that's where this idea and the inspiration was born, because of all the good that we were seeing coming from these pitches. Was we need to do a campaign to get Coop in all 30 MLB stadiums for the purpose of, number one, helping kids like him that just need a shot to be able to be adopted, get adopted. And even more importantly, I would say, being able to show that everybody has a divine purpose, a divine role, a reason why we're here on this earth right now. If a little kid that was left on a street corner halfway around the world has a divine purpose and a reason for being here, all of us has a reason for being here. And so that's the purpose of why we're going around to all of these stadiums. And so it's interesting, and I think inspired that you started with baseball, because I want to tell a story of just how special these miracles are that happen. And so if you remember, when I was the first time I ever played baseball, I remember that, right? And my friends came and they gave me those black cleats and they said, "You're Del Murphy." And from that moment, I followed Del Murphy and his career, and he truly was my role model and my hero all throughout my growing up years, and even after he retired, was somebody that I just admired. Well, Coop got an invite from the Atlanta Braves last year to throw out the first pitch. And Del Murphy is a former Atlanta Braves player, and I found out that they invited Coop to throw out the first pitch on the Hall of Fame night and the alumni night, meaning they would have all of the great Braves from prior years there that night, and they would do a little celebration with them. And I thought in my mind, I'm like, Del Murphy's got to be there. So as I was talking with the Braves, I said, hey, will Del be there at this event? They said, yeah, he will. And I said, is there any chance that Del Murphy could be the catcher of Cooper when he throws out the first pitch? And they said, hey, that's a great idea, but there's no chance of that. And I said, hey, it was worth a shot.
Yeah, right.
So
Shoot your
we're
shot,
there at
right?
Atlanta. We're there at Truist. It's just tons of people there. I'm seeing all these prior great players, and it was just a special thing. And the time came for Coop to throw out the first pitch. So we're staged. We're right there. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Del Murphy. And he has a glove. And I watch Cooper go out to the mound, and I watch Del Murphy come out of the dugout and escort him to the mound. And I just lose it.
Oh,
And
man.
Dale walks Coop out to the mound and then goes and gets behind the catcher, or behind home plate, and is going to be the catcher. And I'm just like, can't believe this. Well, what Dell didn't know is Coop doesn't throw from like the whole distance. He usually goes about halfway.
Okay.
But Dell took Coop like out deep, right?
Yeah,
And
60
so
feet. Yep.
little tiny Coop, and I'm like, oh no, what is gonna happen? And I even kind of yelled like, Coop, go up a little closer. Coop didn't
Right.
hear me, doesn't even matter. And Coop goes, looks, gets a sign, comes set, throws a perfect strike to Dell Murphy, and then
Oh my
just celebrates
gosh.
like he just won the World Series. Dell and Coop come over. I get to meet my high school or my childhood hero and be able
Wow.
to fulfill a dream that how do you make that up, right? How do you make
Right.
that up? So, pretty cool experience.
What an incredible full circle moment, to think about you being, adopted, and then, you getting this love for baseball and becoming Del Murphy, and then all of it coming full circle all these years later, standing there, at Truist Park. Man, the universe, whatever you sort of believe in, is like wild and like the
That's
ultimate
right.
weaver of story.
That's right.
That's absolutely incredible. Now, I know we got to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but did want to ask you, I don't know if you get this question a lot, but I get this question a lot from parents of, kids with disabilities, is like they want to get involved, right? They want to do something, they want to become an advocate. And I think sometimes when they see an individual like you who starts a nonprofit like Rod's Heroes and does the Cooper's first pitch campaign and takes a kid from a city of 14 million to Wrigley Field and Fenway, they're like, wow, is that like the bar that I have to sort of like perform to? But I don't think that's the case. I think just showing up as a parent and being there for your kid is like the greatest thing you can do. So I want to know, like, from your perspective, for all the parents who are listening out there, and hopefully there's a lot of dads listening. This being a Father's Day episode, and if you are an extra lucky mom and you have an extra lucky dad in your life, and you want to share this with them, please share this episode. As I'm curious, what would be some sort of advice that you might give to a dad who's just received a diagnosis, whether in utero or after their child is born, that their kid has a disability?
Yeah, it's a great question. I I wish I could answer this in person with them, but I would say that just as I had said before, sometimes or all of us are entrusted with experiences. Some of those experiences we choose, some of those experiences are chosen for us. And I know that this experience of this father who had just been received a diagnosis is by divine design. And I would say that that child has a role, has a purpose, has a work to be able to do. And part of your responsibility as a dad is to be able to help your child to sing the song that they're meant to sing.
Mm,
And the best way to be able to do that is in and through the service of others.
mm,
And so whether it's baseball, whether it's football, whether it's dance, whatever it is, it's kind of not the point. But I promise, as you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause bigger than yourself, and you allow that child to sing the song that they were meant to sing, that you are going to witness miracles, both big and small. And I've shared some of those experiences that are big, life-changing experiences, but I have just as many tender, amazing little experiences with my boys
yeah.
that I wouldn't trade for the world. And you're going to be entrusted with many of those experiences. So there's a reason why we call it extra lucky. And I would tell that dad, you're super extra lucky to be able to embark on this journey.
100%. Yeah. It's wild how, a lot of times when you think of becoming a parent, you think of like how you have this responsibility, right, to nurture your child and to help them learn and to help them grow. But like, if you're open to it, your kids have the ability to have that same level of impact, if not a greater impact upon you. Like, I'm learning from Emerson every single day, and I'm sure it's the same with you, with Nash and Coop, and all your kids. I do have one last question for you, but before we get to that, I want to give you the chance. Where can people find you on social media and the web? How can they support Rod's Heroes and Cooper's first pitch campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm super active in just trying to share a vulnerable and open story about raising these beautiful children just through social media. And so my Instagram handle is Brady Murray 21. And then Rod's Heroes is at Rod's Heroes, and our website is rods.org. So we love storytelling in just a genuine and vulnerable way.
Amazing. Love it. I am following all those pages, and I encourage everyone to do the same. And if you want to, follow my journey as well as a parent of a child with a disability, you can do so. I am at Danny Jordan on Instagram, and you can check out our book series, The Capables, at thecapables.com or at The Capables on all social media platforms. All right, last question, Brady, and I know this is how Taryn and Jess always like to wrap up their episodes, so I want to honor that. And the question is, what do you believe makes you extra lucky?
Oh boy. That is almost impossible to answer, but I will answer it with the very first thing that comes to my mind. And that is two things. One is my amazing, beautiful wife, who is a supporter of me in so many amazing and special ways.
Yeah.
And as a conduit, that because of my beautiful and amazing special wife, together we have 11 children, 7 of which are adopted.
Wow.
5 of my kids have a diagnosed disability. And I would say that is the greatest blessing of my life, because it allows me to be able to do that divine and special purpose that I know I was supposed to be here on this earth to be able to do, and trying to help these kids, in particular those that have disabilities, to sing the song that they're meant to sing. I consider myself super, super extra lucky to be able
Yep.
to have those.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do want to make sure we give it up for all the moms out there. I know this is like a special Father's Day episode, and definitely want to celebrate the dads, but I think I know I agree with you 100%, Brady, in the sense that, like, I think what has enabled me, much like you, to be the dad and the man that you are is an amazing wife who is incredibly strong, and encouraging my wife, Lynn, who has just been so selfless through all these wild ideas I have, of like, oh, let's create this thing and let's create that thing, that they're always there, like Andrea, your wife, that are like, all right, let's do it.
100%
Let's do it.
right.
So huge shout out to the moms out there in the world. So Brady, I appreciate you hanging out with me here today. Hopefully we get to, maybe do this again in the future, maybe Father's Day next year,
Absolutely.
you and I can get back
Absolutely.
together and do another conversation. But thank you to Taryn and Jess, the entire Extra Lucky community, Extra Lucky moms, for inviting me to be a part of this special episode. It's a great honor, and I very much appreciate it. I didn't really prepare like a sign-off line for this thing, and I find that like wrapping up podcasts is like the most awkward thing ever. So I'll just say thank you everyone for listening. Have an incredible day. Go out and do great things, and be well. Thank you so much, Brady, for hanging out with me today.
Thanks, Danny.
All right. See ya.